Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to today's video. Today I am going to tackle the how to do two-step with Kpro. I think that's probably one of the most requested topics that I've seen in the comments. So today I'm going to address that, show you how two-step works, show you some of the ins and outs of setting up two-step with Kpro on an RSX, and I'll show you some of the settings that I use and also what it sounds like, what some of the different settings sound like. So I'll try to go through all the different settings that are within Kpro and try to show you how they do it so you can hopefully do it better with your car. For those of you that may have not have seen any of my videos, this is my 2006 RSX Type S. I have swapped in a stock K24A2 from a 2006 TSX. Parts wise, mods, when I did the swap, it got a RBC intake manifold. I made a custom 3-inch short ram intake using a bit of K-Tune parts. It has a Skunk 2 mega power header, I believe, and a custom 2.5-inch catback exhaust. There is no cat, it's catless at the moment. That's how I got it. And that's about it. Other than that, the engine's completely stock. It's the stock K24 balancer assembly and oil pump, and it's also got the stock K24 TSX VTC cam gear. One of the things I hope to do in the very short future is swap in a 50-degree VTC cam gear and show you the gains and benefits of that, but that'll be in an upcoming video. So car out of the way, what I should discuss is disclaimer. I know a lot of people will ask me, is this bad for your car? Will it hurt my car? My answer is it's terrible for your car. Don't do it. It'll break it. But realistically, it's not good for it. Lots of people use it. So as long as it's done safely, you shouldn't have any issue, but there's always that chance. If you do it, you could damage something, especially if you do it when it's cold. Make sure, if you're gonna do two-step, make sure the engine's warm. Don't ever do two-step on a cold engine. The other big thing is you really shouldn't be doing two-step if you have a cat. It's really bad for the cat. It'll break the cat. And also there's no chance of getting any flames whatsoever if you have a cat. The cat would effectively block any flames. So my answer, I know I'm gonna get questions and I don't mind answering questions, but if this is bad for my car or it's gonna hurt it, my answer is it's terrible for your car, don't do it, and two-step is not for you. So that being said, I'm gonna show you how I set up two-step. I'll try to show you the ins and outs of the different settings and what they do, and then I will do a whole bunch of the settings from outside the car with the camera so you can see how it works and what it sounds like. So one other thing I should say is, while I love Kpro, it is really good. It does a great job. It makes my life as a tuner very easy. I can get you usually the best results with Kpro, but one of the things it is lacking is a good two-step. It does not do a great job of shooting flames. Sometimes you can't get any flames to shoot. So that being said, there are tips and tricks on how to do it. I hope to show some of those to you today, and also a modification that I've done, which requires a bit of work. You basically use a couple relays and some modifications to the wiring harness, and also the use of the nitrous features again, to take advantage of using the nitrous features as outputs so that you can do some different stuff. So I'll get into all that in a bit and show you the results. Let me get strapped down and I will go through it all. So with everything up and running, what we need to do is go to rev limits. We're gonna have to enable launch control. You can specify if you want it with a switch of some sort, but the easiest thing to do is just set it to always on and rely on the vehicle speed sensor to turn it off when we're not rolling. So if we go through the settings, there are 2 RPM settings. One is for the fuel and ignition settings. That activates the fuel and ignition settings that we will input here, and I'll go through that in a second. The other one is the RPM limiter, so it tries to not let it go above that RPM. The big thing is these 2 RPM values need to be fairly close, and this RPM limiter one needs to be higher than the fuel and ignition one, because this RPM is where the settings are engaged, and then this is the kind of the max RPM. So what you want to do, and what a good rule of thumb is, usually about 100 RPM difference, but you can play around with that 100 RPM difference, 200 RPM difference, and then if we keep going through the settings, the maximum speed, so this is the maximum vehicle speed where it will enable launch control. Once it goes above this vehicle speed, the launch control gets turned off. And then the important settings. This is the fuel enrichment and the ignition settings. So fuel enrichment is how much extra fuel you want to basically squirt while you're doing two-step. And then ignition retard, so how many degrees of ignition retard. Fuel enrichment's easy. Basically, it's just a value you dump on top, so you can use like a value like 50, 100, 200, 300, and I'll go through that. The more important value is the retard ignition. The way it works is, so wherever you end up in your map, so say for example, we're going to do two-step at 5,000 RPM, or sorry, 5,500 RPM, which would be this RPM range. And then full throttle, which is around, let's call it this column. So we have a value of 28 degrees ignition timing, plus or minus a bit, 29, 27, depending where it lands up. So what we need to do is take into account that. So table timing is roughly, let's call it 30. Table timing is roughly 30 in this case, and we want to retard it from there, and we want to go negative. So technically we need a value that is negative this value plus the amount that we want to retard up to the maximum technically of 10. So in this case, if we put a value of 50, we would definitely go much lower than the table timing, and we would max out the amount of retard that Kpro allows. So if we were to put a value of 50 here, what we should see in ignition when we're doing two-step is we should hopefully see our maximum of minus 10. Fuel, let's start off with a value of 100, and I'm going to fix this. So we're going to do 55 for the fuel and ignition RPM activation, and then we're going to do 56 for the launch limiter value. I'm going to quickly upload this. And what you can do is, I'll do this first one in the car, and then the next ones I will do outside the car, and I will add somehow the settings that I'm using for those examples. But the big thing is make sure you're up to temp, and let's watch ignition and see what ignition does while we're doing two-step, as well as RPM, because we're shooting for about 55, 56. So make sure it's always on, enabled, and basically floor it. So that's it. It's all set up sort of. So I'm gonna go put the camera outside the car and do a whole bunch of different settings to show you what it's like. So from that outside example, I believe what you see is the best, to get the best results, the biggest flames with Kpro settings, I used a value of 6,000, 6,100, 500 units of fuel, and 60 degrees of retard ignition. That gave the best flames, let's call it, and the best results with just these settings. Now, keep in mind, every car is slightly different, and it makes a big difference if the exhaust system is hot and whatnot. So that being said, there were flames, and that is kind of, you can play around with this, fine tune it. Every car is different. You might be able to get slightly bigger flames. You might not be able to get any flames. There is a way to get even slightly bigger flames, but it is a lot more work, and I'm not sure if most people are up to it. Basically, it's with adding a relay. The beauty part of Kpro is there are nitrous programmable outputs, and we can program these outputs to do different things. And one of these things you could do, and I've done, and I'm going to show you, is how to program an output to basically create an ignition cut. In order to do this, you actually have to wire in relays so that they can be used to interrupt the ignition coil signals when you want it, when you program it with all these parameters. And if you do that, you will basically create a bigger ignition cut, dump a whole bunch of extra fuel, and create bigger flames. So let me quickly cut to some shots of that, and if you like that, if you think it's worthwhile, then I'm going to go through all the settings on how to do that. So as you see, the flames are bigger by doing this mod, and what I've done is basically put in 2 relays, and the relays cut out ignition coil 3 and 4. So those 2 ignition coils are not firing, but they're still getting fuel. That fuel is being dumped into the exhaust and being ignited by the other ignition coils that are still firing. That being said, it's not the easiest thing to set up, so you have to decide for yourself if it's worth the hassle to go through all this trouble to get a bit bigger flames. If you are interested, basically all I've done is I've taken 2 automotive style relays, and relays are basically switches that are electronic. So I've used those relays to basically allow me to interrupt the ignition coil signal directly from the ECU. These relays are triggered by the nitrous output. So what we do is we have to set a bunch of parameters similar to how I set up the crackle and tune stuff. Basically, we go to nitrous 1 output, set it to generic output, set it to always on, and I've wired up and chosen a wire. So ES21 is hooked up as my trigger wire for the relays. The way the relays are set up is so that if I'm not sending a signal to the trigger wire, they act completely normal. They don't interrupt the ignition signal, so it would be as if they were not there. But when I do send the signal, based on certain parameters, and I'll get into that in a second, it cuts the ignition signal, which basically means those coils are not firing and the fuel is being dumped and will create bigger pops and bangs. So what I've done is I've matched the engine speed, so 6,000 RPM is what we're using for ignition cut, to a maximum of 10,000 RPM, so that's just so that it'll always do it. Engine load, minimum 7, maximum -61. To give you some perspective, -61 is positive, so 30 pounds of boost. So it'll do it basically only in full throttle with high load. Throttle, I want it to only happen if I'm giving it at least 75. You could actually probably tighten that up and make it higher, and then up to at least 113. It basically just needs to be up to over 100, because sometimes your TPS signal will read slightly over 100. So I've put 113. And then vehicle speed, I only want this to happen if I'm not moving, basically. So 0 miles per hour up to a maximum of 5 miles per hour. You can technically match the vehicle speed, so if you've used 2 in the launch control settings, use 2 here. So yeah, basically what happens is we utilize this nitrous control to trigger these relays to cut out ignition. and that gives us even more fuel and bigger flames, as you see in the clip that I just showed. So this is super advanced. Most people probably shouldn't attempt it, because if you have to cut some wires and splice this in, but there's lots of you guys that are willing to do it and want to try it, so it's something you can try. I've used 2 relays. Technically you could use 3 relays and get even more, but 2 seems to be a pretty good number. And yeah, so that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, found it useful. If you have questions, as always, I don't mind answering questions, but if you have questions, just please watch the whole video, soak it all in, and I usually have already answered all the questions that I get via email. So do me a favor, just watch the video thoroughly, and if you still have a question, by all means, email me, shoot me a message on Instagram. I'm always happy to answer questions. I can set stuff up remotely or via email, but the big thing with two-step and setting this up is it actually is a ton of trial and error, because every car is slightly different. So you could try these settings and they may not work on your car. They may work on your car. Your car might like slightly different settings, but at least you have an idea, and I've tried to give you a sampling of what different settings do. So all that being said, thanks everyone for watching. I really appreciate everyone that likes and comments and subscribes. If you do like the video and you're not subscribed, please subscribe, please like it, and I will continue making content. I have a bunch of videos planned, so if you guys are enjoying these videos and want me to keep up with it, let me know, and I will keep doing it. So thanks again for watching, and hopefully I'll get another video to you guys very soon. Bye now.